Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we're focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Christine Van Horn, and Dr. Van Horn is an author, a teacher, and a speaker. And she's been a certified emergency manager for 30 years and recently has retired. She's now applying her emergency management experience to focus on character in society. And she's written 2 books for older children to teach them character through the eyes of a superhero, and is here today to discuss how veterans and service members can use their experiences to be a mentor to those in our lives who may not necessarily be in the military. So people in our families or those around us. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Christine. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate being here. It's an honor to be on this program.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background? I know I got a little bit into your background, but I'm sure there's a whole lot more to it than that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My love of the military started when I was young. My dad was in the Navy in World War II and out of the Navy, by the time I came around. But we grew up in an environment that was very patriotic. And he was able to talk about a lot of his experiences in the military. And he always wove that into the things that he taught us as children. So I grew up in that environment. And when I got older, I wanted to be in the military. I wanted to go to Vietnam as a medic. But by the time I finished x-ray school, it was just a little bit too late. So I kind of missed that opportunity. And later in my career, I was in federal service for quite some time. So I served my country, but as a civilian. So just, a little bit differently. And then what also shaped me a lot was my dad lived with me in the last part of his life. So I got to hear the ending, of all of his stories and live those things with him. And I've learned how important that is to families to know what they can. Not in all cases can you learn those things because of different reasons, but wherever you can, I think that's really important. And I have a master's degree from the Naval War College. I was invited in by an admiral with my federal service connections, and I just have a heart for the military. So this is really an honor if I can share some of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, especially from your experience living with your father later on in his life and learning some of the things that he went through, sharing those stories over time. It just is so important because over time we start to lose those stories, especially as those older generations start passing away. Those stories, if they hadn't told those stories to other people, like your father did with you, or written them down in a book or even in a journal or something like that, those stories start to get lost to history. And it's really important that those stories get told and continue to be told throughout time. So I think, a lot of the lessons that you learned from him and then, have applied through your life and your own experiences, I think are really important, and passing those on to other people. And sort of what we're talking about is in the realm of mentorship.
Yes.
A lot of that comes from your own experiences, and your experiences are influenced by those people who are around you. So I think it's really important to understand all of that going into this conversation, right?
Absolutely. The book that I wrote is called Teach Your Children Timeless Truths in Uncertain Times, and it's about mentorship. But so much that is in there is timeless, and it applies to the military. It applies to all of us. And, that I just want to be able to explain how we can really do that better and be better mentors. I was blessed to have my dad be such an incredible mentor in my life. And that really can be true today. We don't hear too much about mentorship anymore, but we can. And we really need to do that.
And a lot of our listeners are familiar with being a mentor because we all did it all the time in the military while we were serving. We influenced those people who we were leading
Yes.
based on the experiences that we learned from, uh, whether they're good or bad. We all learn from our mistakes. Hopefully, that's the ideal situation, anyways. But when you're a leader and you start seeing one of the junior soldiers or junior people under you who are making the same mistakes that you might have made earlier on in your career, that's your place to step in and mentor those people, based on those experiences that you've learned from in your past. And I'd love to see how you think that the mentorship in the military can cross over into our personal lives and how we mentor those people around us.
Absolute mentorship, I think, is threefold. One is really talking about character, teaching that and mentoring those under you and how to be better persons of character. And then second, teaching them life skills. That could be like you said, in the military, you're teaching them certain skills that you know need to be refined. In your family, it can be, you know, more generic things like time management, keep a calendar, learn how to solve problems. And you learn so much of that in the military. It's part of the structure. And that structured environment from the military can really easily apply to how you interact with your family as a mentor because you're used to showing what you do. So if you're telling someone in the military, this is how you need to do this procedure or this process is what you need to follow, you do it by example. And the same applies in your family. If you're telling them this is what you need to do, whether it's, like I said, time management or cleaning your room or, whatever those things are that you want them to learn, your children are going to watch you. Just as the military people are looking at you to see if you're really doing what you said, to do to them. The same thing applies in your family. Your kids are going to watch you. And so, if you tell them, you need to make your bed every morning is the first thing you do, like you're used to, in a military aspect. Well, the kids need to see you do that at home too. And so some of those things that you learn, I mean, military people are really well adapted to teaching these things and being a mentor within their own family because you're living that life in the military.
Right. And I think it is especially important. The point that you brought up is leading by example and showing people what it is that you're expecting them to do and showing that you're willing to do that thing too. So if it's something just as simple as make your bed in the morning, you tell your kids to make your bed and they walk by your room and they look in the room, the bed's all a mess. Well, why do I have to do it if mom or dad isn't doing it too? Just doesn't compute. And so part of being a good leader, being a good mentor is showing how to do things, showing that you're going to be willing to do those things that you're asking those other people to do as well. Right.
Absolutely. And, the beauty of mentorship is those that you're mentoring start at your level. You've learned these things, you've walked through these processes, whether you're talking about this in the military or within your family. So they get to start at a higher level than if they had to do it from, ground zero for themselves.
Yeah. It's kind of just leveling up in life. You're
It
getting
is.
that kickstart where you don't have to, as the person who's being mentored, you don't have to struggle through some of those difficult situations that maybe the person who's mentoring you may have struggled through and found all these mistakes. You don't have to do that. Now, okay, I'm not going to do X, Y, or Z, and I'm going to do it the right way. And now I'm just learning and refining the best way of doing things and making it even that much better as opposed to struggling trying to figure out what is that best way of doing whatever it is that you're trying to learn about, right?
Really is. And, it's important because if you are being mentored, say you're the mentor and I am the person you're mentoring. If I try to do something to the way you show me and I don't do it right, you're going to mentor me to get me back into the right process. And it's the beauty of mentorship because it's continual. It's not just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process.
Right. And you mentioned that you're an author. We talked about that in the intro as well. And your latest book is Teacher Children Timeless Truths in Uncertain Time. What are these timeless truths that you mentioned, and how do they apply to the military and veterans in their mental?
The first thing I have consider it like a three-step process. So the first is to teach character, guide your children to be better persons of character. And how wonderful it is to do that from the military perspective. Just look at the core values in the different branches of the military. There you got your character, whether it's, respect or honor or any of those, any of the branches, like just compile them all together. And those are your character traits that you're going to teach the kids. And you live that in the military. It's not just something that says, okay, my value is respect. No, you live it. That's part of the process of the military and the chain of command and everything that you follow. It's there. So you've got it inside of you. You don't need, like you don't need somebody to teach you how to do it. It's internal to who you are in the military. And a lot of families who don't come from that background, they may have to really think about it. And they might need a course on it. And they might need to, look at lists of character traits and think what they are. But the core values of the military are character traits. And that's your starting point. That's good.
Right. And some of those core values that sort of just establishes the culture in the military is that
Yes.
that's just how people interact with each other. That's the baseline. And it may be at a point where in your family or in some other relationships outside of the military where you may not have that culture where there's
Mhm.
loyalty, there's duty, respect. You don't have all of that culture built in. And you may need to again lead by example and show people like this is the way to be and do things this way. Things are better this way, and influence the culture in your own household to become a better representation of those values, right?
It really is. And you said something that's important because, you have those values in the military, but they need to transcend to your family life. And your children are never too young to learn those values. Whether it's like you said, it's duty or honor or respect or any of the core values in the military, teach those to your children when they're young. And they're going to grow up to be a lot more wholesome people because people, it's going to open doors for them when people are treated with respect by young children. That is noticed. And it's just taking what you know from your military life and gently applying that in your family life. It's there for you. And it's just, you got to, in the military, you've got a great background to start with.
So the character, that's one of these
Right.
timeless truths. Let's talk about the others.
The next one is life skills. And so life skills can be any of the things like, we talked about, making your bed, feeding the dog, those kind of things. But it can also be things that used to be taught. I grew up in the 50s and 60s, and things like problem solving were taught and time management. I always had a calendar that I tracked ever since I was little. And I'm teaching my grandchildren how to do that now. And it's kind of foreign to them. Yes, they have to do it for school, and track their courses and their homework, but in their own lives, they're not used to doing things like that. So with my own 7-year-old grandson, I've got a calendar because a planner was a little too, advanced for him. And he's tracking all of his hockey games and, when he's doing these different activities and days off from school. And that's time management. You can do that with children when they're young. And then as they get older, my older grandchildren, they've got planners, and I'm showing them how to do it and how to mark them. And those are things that are really good because it'll keep them on time, learning schedules, and it's all part of being orderly. And you're used to that in the military. If it wasn't in order, things would not run the way they're supposed to. But it can be done in a non-militaristic way because these are values. These are important. These are these timeless truths that, we don't see too much anymore in the world.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff that even, and I'm younger than you are based on what you were saying there, but even stuff that we learned in school, our kids, when they went to school, we homeschool them now, but weren't being taught some of these things. And it was just mind boggling to me that some of this stuff just isn't being taught. And we talk to other parents in our neighborhood who have older children, and it's just some of these things are just not taught at all. And it's like, how are people going to get through life without knowing some of this stuff? Right. But that falls on the parents. Like that, it's not the school's job to teach them every little life skill that there is out there. That's your job as a parent.
Yes.
And, when you're trying to mentor people, you kind of have to show them that you're going to take responsibility and this is going to be something that you're going to help teach.
Absolutely. And it just needs to be done, and coming from the military where you have structure, you can see that, I think, a lot better than a lot of families can, where there isn't that structure and they don't have that kind of a foundation in life. And yet you do need to do it. And it's part of parenting, but in some ways it transcends it because you're teaching, these skills that, maybe you wouldn't as a parent doing parenting teach some of these skills. It's kind of like a little bit of an extra. It's different from being a teacher. It's mentoring, and it's really kind of nice.
And the third one, so we had the character, the life skills, and the third now is
Be the example.
okay.
Be that example. Your kids are going to follow what you do. They're going to say what you say. If you ever hear, young children saying things that are inappropriate, it's because they heard it somewhere. May not be their parents, but they heard it from some adult somewhere or some older kid somewhere. They're going to repeat those kind of things. And oftentimes I don't even know what it means, but those are words that they've heard, and saying these things. So if they see you living these things out, in a good way is if you take, a topic a week or a topic a month, whatever it would be, if I go back to time management and, with your calendars or planners or something and do it, and repeat it. So it's reinforced, maybe ask questions about some of those things or, and that's how you can be that example to them and keep that open door for conversation because your kids may come back to you, because you'll have a greater rapport with them, about things that are going on in school. And, it kind of builds a better communication pathway with them. But being that example so that they see you walk out those things that you're telling them to do is just really important.
I mean, that makes sense. Going back to something as simple as making your bed,
Mm.
right? You talked about that before. If you're telling your kids to make their bed every morning and your bed is a mess, they're going to look at it and say, well, no, I'm not going to do it. And you're not going to end up with the end result that you're hoping for when you're not leading by example. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, these are so simple, you don't even really think about them sometimes. I think, having good character, like you want that in your children,
Yes.
but we don't oftentimes define what that is. What are those traits that we're looking for in a quote unquote good person that we want to raise? And how are we, if we don't define that, how are we leading them in the right direction? And so I think part of the process I would imagine is defining some of this stuff and just making sure that we know what it is that we're hoping to get from these children when we ask them to do certain things, right?
Absolutely. At the back of my book, I have an appendix of 250 character traits. So if you're trying to, get your mind around what are character traits, look through the list, see which ones apply to your family. Some may just like stand out to you like, oh, I really need to work on honesty. I need to really work on whatever it is, trigger some of those kind of things. And then, go back to your military experience. How do you walk out core values in the military? You can do that with your family. It doesn't have to be, hard, you work for me and you have to follow what I say kind of thing, but you can guide and mentor. Mentorship is guiding and advising, and you can show them what those things really mean in their lives and how to walk those out.
Yeah. And so how do we take these three truths that you're talking
Mhm.
about, these timeless truths, the character, life skills, and being the example, and apply these truths through mentorship? How do we do that? What does that process
There's
look like?
there's different things that you can do that really will help this process. And so I have them listed and explained in my book, but it's things as an adult you can do, such as be intentional. You can't do this once and walk away from it. Your children really need to know that you're serious, that you really mean this in a nice way, in a parenting way, I guess. But you have to be intentional. One way you can do this is just, make sure you sit down at the dinner table when you can and have dinner and have a dinner table discussion and pick one of these topics. That's an easy way to do it, and just have dinner table discussions by being intentional. Then your kids are going to know, you know what, one night a week, we're going to sit at this table and we're going to have a family discussion. And, mom or dad are going to lead the topic. And it's going to be one of these things you decide as a family you need to be able to study. And then you need to be committed to doing it. Kind of goes along with intentional, but you need to think long range. You're going to work on these things with your family and this is your way of life. You're going to do these kind of things. And then the children need to see you as the leader. You're going to lead these things. You're really going to be the one that they can follow because children are not going to learn how to be a leader unless they know how to follow. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be as militaristic as you would have in the military with your own organization, but you need to be that leader and they need to see it. It'll teach them how they become leaders. So, in just some of the ways that you approach this with your own family, is going to help them in the future. Just some of these kind of things. Making decisions. You can talk about making decisions as a family or making decisions you're going to do this. You're all going to keep a daily planner and you're going to talk through schedules with each other and, do that. My husband and I used to do that every Sunday night. We'd sit down with our planners and we would, plan out the week and make sure we were coordinated with each other. And it became a habit. And making these things as habits is another part of all of this, just so that your family understands this is what you're going to do. This is just the way you're going to live as a family.
Right. And I think part of this is going back to that being the example, leading by example. When you're talking about the kids need to learn how to follow before they can learn how to lead. If they're the follower and they're watching their parent be the leader, just like anything else, they can learn the bad stuff. They can learn bad language. They can learn bad habits, but they can also learn the good stuff by observing and watching the their parent be the leader and take charge and be that person who is leading them through whatever it happens to be. It could be, something difficult in their lives. It could be, even something fun like a family vacation. But they are going to be a leader, and how they lead is going to influence how their children become leaders later on in life.
I do, children need to know what's expected of them. Just think of your military career and the people that you are over. What would happen if they didn't know what they were supposed to do or what was expected of them? You'd have a mess. And that's what is happening in families a lot today because the kids just don't know what's expected of them. So part of this whole process is really doing that. So if you're taking, one of the core values you're studying is that character trait as an example, explain to the children what's expected of them. This is what I expect you to do for respect. Or if somebody doesn't respect you when they should, this is still how I expect you to act. They need to know those things from you. And all of these can easily come out through the dialogue based around all of these things.
Right. And I think something as simple as what you said earlier is just having a dinner time conversation. I think that's extremely important. Put the phone away, sit down at the table, and actually have a discussion with your family and talk to each other. And especially when you're talking about young children who are still trying to figure out the world, they don't know all the time right from wrong in every situation. And they probably have questions. Hey, this is what happened at school today. This is what happened, at baseball practice or whatever. And something came up and I don't know how to handle it. Help me out with this. And then you can have those kind of conversations with your family. And, maybe, if you have more than one child, maybe another child had similar experience and they could share their own perspectives and be a mentor in a way as well
Yes.
by sharing those experiences, right?
Yes, because children can be mentors to other children. If they've been there before, they know what to do. They can share, with their siblings or friends or relatives. They can. So, children can mentor. And if they see you doing that, they can do that too, as long as, put the caveats on it. It's not like bossing somebody around. You're teaching from your experience, and you're explaining from your experience, not like because you know everything, but you're sharing. And, so there's good ways you can do that as well.
So all of this mentorship, I mean, I think we've kind of danced around this question here a little bit in this discussion, but I mean, being a mentor really is kind of a key to helping make those other people in your life successful, right?
It is. It really is. Because once you can share your experiences and point them in the right direction, and come from what you know already, you are making them successful. You are pointing them in that right direction. And they then start off in whatever situations they face in life at a different tier. That it's like if they're coming into, as an example, a teamwork situation at school, group project or something, but they're used to having this kind of family dialogue and learning from each other and helping each other and all of that. They're going to come into those future experiences from that framework, and they will have a success advantage. So this has long-term implications. It's not just, how they can get through this task or that task, or if they can learn respect or, something. These become lifelong things that will help them and guide them and make them more successful in life. When they go to, as they get a job interview, that potential person who's going to be their supervisor is going to see that they have character, that they can handle themselves differently than somebody else coming in. So, it might be hard to tell young children that this is going to be important to them, many years down the road, but it is. It really is. And they're going to follow your leadership.
And that could make or break things like a job interview.
Yes.
If you're looking at two candidates that on paper, they're pretty much equal, similar education background, similar experience background, and all that kind of stuff. If you have one who walks in with a crappy attitude and is not really the type of person you'd want to walk into work every day and deal with, and then you have someone else who's nice or respectful, they're honest about, whatever is going on, like, that's the kind of person I would want to hire regardless of their background. I'd want to hire that person no matter what. You could teach other stuff in a lot of jobs. You could teach that stuff to people, but you can't teach having good character quite as easily. So, that could totally make or break things like a job interview in the future, right?
Yes, it really could. It really could.
Yeah. So I know how this type of thing can benefit the individuals being mentored, right? They're learning from people who already have had these experiences in their lives. What about the benefits to the people, to the mentors themselves? What are we looking at with that? How do those mentors benefit through helping and guiding those other people?
I think because they see the effects of what they are instilling into the lives of others has a great benefit. It really does. I remember being young and my dad explaining things that he did in the military. He was not in active combat, so he was able to explain a lot of what he did. But he would explain those things and what it was like to work together on a team or doing things in shifts. And I loved that, and I applied those things to my life. So later on, when I became a leader in my positions, I remembered those things, and I'd tell him, well, I did this and I remember what you told me. And I think it meant a lot to him that, his words of wisdom were applied. And I think if you do that in your own family and you watch your children apply the things, that really does your heart good, that you have carried on with important messages to your family. Those are those timeless truths because they become timeless. Your children will carry those the rest of their lives. And that's a good feeling.
Well, that's absolutely true because if just like anything else, if they've learned how to do something, they're going to then be able to pass that on to future generations. And that's one of those things that has a generational impact where not only is it your kids who might be benefiting, but maybe your grandkids and grandkids and so on. Because if you do the job right, you're able to teach them how to instill those values in other people. And that will just last year after year going down your whole family tree, probably long after we're gone, that will still continue to have an impact. So it's really great to know that, if you focus on this and you do the right things and actually be a good example for the people around you, then it could have such a long lasting impact in a positive way that it'll actually make other people's lives that you haven't even met yet so much better.
It is. And may I share an example
Yeah,
of that?
absolutely.
I was teaching a class around the 4th of July, and I had children in elementary school that I was teaching, and we said the Pledge of Allegiance. And then I asked them to explain it. And they say it in school, but they couldn't tell you what it meant and they couldn't get the words out. So I did it word by word. And I had the flag in front, and we talked about why there were so many stripes and so many stars and what it all means. And we really spent time on it. And I could see no one had ever taught them that before. And then we said the Pledge of Allegiance at the end, and they said the words correctly. And at first they were kind of all blurred because they didn't know what they were. It was just words and things that they were saying. And, I felt good that I spent that time with them on something like that. And that's so easily for any of your audience to be able to do because the kids will learn the Pledge of Allegiance in school, but they don't know what it means. And the words are big, and the young kids, they don't know. So when I explained those things to them, I could see it was like, wow, that's what it means. And it had an impact. And I think that's the type of thing that, your all of your, audience can do with their families, and they're going to see that impact. And that's rewarding. When I got done with that lesson, I felt like this was the right thing to do. And that is important. And that's a benefit like to the mentors as well.
For sure. And I've seen videos, actually, not too long ago, I saw a video of someone who was going around to people on a college campus, talking to college students, asking them simple, basic questions like how many stars are on the flag or how many stripes are on the flag. They couldn't answer the question, or what do the stripes and the stars represent on the flag. They couldn't answer those questions. And it was mind blowing to see those types of responses from college students, people who definitely should have been educated in that basic knowledge. And it starts to make you think, what else do they not know?
That's
And
right.
and that could be a problem too. So again, there's a lot of learning to be done that doesn't necessarily have to happen in a classroom, but when you have a good solid mentor in your corner who can show you or teach you the things that are the right things to do, and the stuff that you need to know, just basic things that you should know, it really goes a long way.
It really does. Coming from the military side, just draw on those experiences. Even if it's like a holiday, Veterans Day, kids are off school, Veterans Day. Okay. Well, they might have a little more knowledge because, you're in the military, and they understand maybe what veteran is. But if not, really explain those things to them. You come from a great advantage point to be able to do that. And wherever you can, share experiences. My dad shared a lot with me, but he was able to talk a, a lot of his experiences with me. But to this day, I have them and I treasure them. And I'm actually in process of writing a new book on the greatest generation. And I'm putting those stories in there. I learned these when I was young, and he reaffirmed them throughout his life. And so I know they're accurate, but I treasure those things. So, if you come back to your family, say you're away for a while and you come back, you might not be able to talk about everything. You might not be able to say things that you are doing or places you've been or things like that. But wherever you can share experiences that have life lessons, please do. I learned about teamwork, with my dad. And so those kind of, you know, uh, things that you can share like that with your family are priceless and they will remember them. I just want to encourage you if there's things that you can write down or record them. I've got recordings of my dad talking about his life in the military in World War II. Those are treasures. Any of those things that you can do, that's part of mentorship as well, where you can share those things and your kids can go back later on and hear your voice talking about the things that you have done. And it just, shows them that you're the leader, that, showed to be for your family. You are that. And they will treasure those things.
Absolutely. Well, Christine, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to have you come on and share with us about this whole process of mentoring people. And I know a lot of the people who are listening, they're familiar with being a mentor or being mentored through their service in the military, but we don't oftentimes make that connection to how that could apply to our personal lives. And I think it's such a big opportunity to be able to help instill some of those values in the younger generations that it really would be a disservice not to talk about this type of thing. So thank you again for coming on
My
and
pleasure.
sharing all of this. Before we close out, where can people go to either get in touch with you or and find out more about your books and your writings and everything else that you have going on?
Sure. My website is www.drchris.co. So it's Dr. Chris, but it's just lowercase and just drchris.co. It's not .com. It's .co. So that's my website. And that will lead you to books. I actually have an online program for mentorship in there. And, if somebody wants to actually have more of a formal process for it. And then my email address is chris@drchris.co. So it's CHRIS at drchris.co. And, if anybody is interested in the course, if you email me, I'll give you the code. So it's a half price course for any of your listeners.
Excellent. And I'll have links to all of that in the show notes. So anyone who wants to go take a look at it and maybe grab a copy of the book or take a look at the course, definitely go check that out by going through the show notes first, and you'll get there pretty quickly. So thank you again for coming on and sharing all of this about mentorship. I really do appreciate you coming on and taking.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate being on. And thank you, all of you, for your service to our country.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On podcast. If you want to support the show, please check out Scott's book, Surviving Son, on Amazon. All of the sales from that book go directly back into this podcast and work to help veterans in need. You can also follow the Drive On podcast on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you listen to podcasts.